investing, real estate investing community, and I do not want to talk about me because there is quite a lot of ventures I'm involved in. But the primary goal of today's conversation workshop is to welcome Mr. John Simcoe. Hello, Mr. John. How you been doing today?
I'm doing excellent. It is good to see you. It is good to see you, Yarek.
Likewise. Our primary goal in such kind of presentations is to encourage everybody who is listening, watching this presentation, to make sure that you will be encouraged to do stuff like Mr. John, like real estate investors, successful. And the message is, as long as you will put your mindset to it, you can achieve anything, whatever you want, right? Especially we are talking about real estate investing. So, Mr. John, would you mind introducing yourself, who you are, and everybody more likely know of you, they heard you, they've seen you, but let's say like who you are, what you're doing at this moment.
Okay, so I'm a full-time professional real estate investor. I've been dealing with investment properties of my own for the last 13 years. I was fortunate enough to get involved in my early 20s when I got out of college, and we can talk about that too. And then but it's as I've gone out and learned a whole bunch of different strategies. Mainly with residential, but if it involves a house, you name it, I've probably done a deal that can work that way. I've raised a lot of private capital to do these deals. And so I think that, and I've been full-time at it for the last 6 years. So it's really been wonderful to kind of break free of that job that I had before and be able to do something I'm really passionate about.
6 years in real estate is like 50 years in real life, is it?
It feels like a long time. I mean, I would work my job and then I would grow it in the evenings and wake up early and write newsletters and do all kinds of stuff to keep the real estate business growing to the point where I could actually leave that work. But it was like full time all the time, and if not more so. It is a lot of upfront work, but I wouldn't change a thing. I'm very happy with the way things are working out.
So, what made you decide to do real estate? Right, I believe that you were engineer, right, before?
Architecture.
Architecture. Okay. So what made you decide to go into the real estate stuff? Like, give us the brief overview, please.
Well, how it started is it wasn't necessarily in my upbringing. It wasn't something that my parents did. It was, I had a business that I started when I was 19, and it was with a good friend of mine. We are still good friends to this day. And he was 18, and we opened up a martial arts studio, a Taekwondo club.
Oh, okay.
And so we were doing that as a business, and it was growing. Every year we doubled in size for 5 straight years. And his parents were very entrepreneurial, and they said, "Geez, you boys look like you're having a lot of fun with that. Like, we're very trusting with each other." And getting along very well as in terms of being business partners. They said, "Well, have you ever thought about buying real estate?" And they said, "You can pay off all the mortgage and everything and have some leftover money. And that's called cash flow. That's a passive income that you could earn." And I never really thought much about that. As a young boy, I had an uncle who was very influential too, but it was when all those different people and all those dots connected, I thought that sounds great. So I was in university studying to be an architect, and I never did become an architect at all. But at the time I was, that was a $20,000 a year program, and I would work extra jobs. I ran my Taekwondo business, and I escaped architecture school with very minimal student debt. And I worked really hard that first summer out of school. I had my summer job that hired me back every year. And I went there and I worked extra jobs and I paid off my student debt all in the first summer after university. I didn't want that debt to carry with me for a long time. I thought it would hold me back. And so my friend ended up actually going out to Fort McMurray to work in the oil sands from the Taekwondo club. And at that point in time, I went and hired. We had trained. We had 6 black belts that I'm really proud of, guys that got their black belts through me, out of all my students over those 5 years. And we still keep in touch to this day, and I'm super proud of them. And what I did was I hired them and I made them employees of the Taekwondo business. So my friend went off and he came back a year later.
Mm-hmm.
When he came back, I said, look at the Taekwondo club, look how it's grown. We've had another year of doubling in size. You know, and so, and I said, I want to show you something. And I took him. I had actually went and bought a rental property with a different friend of mine. And so I said, look how proud I am. I have this, you know, I got out of school, I paid off my debt, I bought this rental property. And then he came back and we met again. And he said, that's all good. Now, myself on that first real estate deal, my friend and I, we were making $400 a month. And it was the numbers of this deal without any training whatsoever were crazy, because we turned a $7,500 down payment into $75,000 pretty quickly. And so I was my friend who I was showing all that to, and I said, you know, I'm so proud of that. He showed me his Fort McMurray paycheck. He said, this is what I get paid, and every week. And it was quite a bit more than what I was making at the time between all my sources of work. And so I decided I was going to leave Winnipeg. I went to Fort McMurray. And from there, I just decided to be disciplined. I saved about 80% of my oil sand money that I was making. And I spent a lot of time buying books. And that eventually led to me buying courses from other people. Probably people a lot of them have probably been on your show before, Yarrick.
Let's name it show.
And well, I know I've seen some of them on, but you know, some people sell some courses, and so I would buy courses over the years and study them. But the one thing I did is I always took action with the things that I was learning. I'd only buy a course if I really was going to do what was in that course. I was already used to spending $20,000 a year on my formal education. So buying a course for $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 or $500 or whatever, it just, I stopped caring about getting a diploma, and I started caring more about getting the knowledge that's inside and learning from someone who's done it before. So that's what I started focusing all my learning towards. But it was that first friend of mine's parents that put the idea in my head, and that grew. And
definitely. So I see that you should you know reach out to your friends' parents and tell them how successful you are, right? You know what I mean, and thank them. Once upon a time, long time ago, I was sponsored, right, by a Italian company at the beginning of my immigration, right? And they sponsored me. They paid for the lawyers and everybody else. And because of them, I am, you know, Canadian, to be honest with you, because of their help and support. And what I have done is recently I flew to Montreal and I went to see the gentleman who was believing in me, and I told him what I've been doing, how I've been doing, and I give him a firm handshake, and that's what made him so, you know, happy, because something which make them, you know, believe it in the people and making sure that they are successful, right? So I do encourage everybody who are successful and they have a mentor, tell them about what is going on. Tell them how successful you are, what you've been doing, right? Make them proud, right? One of the things which everybody should be thankful for, right? So I am excited about that because I see a lot of values, John, about your, you know, real estate investing venture, your personal, you know, experiences about how you became very, very successful real estate investor. And I can talk with you, I believe it, for days, but we have a short period of the time. So which strategy is the most appealing to you, you like the most from the real estate investing? You know, so many strategies are there, right?
Yeah, well, I do use a couple of different strategies in my business on a regular basis, but the one that I use the most, and And in many ways, my preferred strategy is to do rent to owns, or what's called lease purchases.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really been focused on doing a lot of that. That's originally the first strategy that allowed me to quit my job. I had set a couple rent to owns up, and then they actually worked out. And so I saw that it was real, and then I saw that I could replace my job with that. So I set some more up, and once most of these are 2 and 3 year long deals. So I would have a series of those on the go, and then I would be able to predict my income 1, 2, and 3 years in the future. And I knew that I would be free to be a real estate investor and free my time from having to go to work if I just I think I'd done the math at the time. I think I needed to do like 3 or 4 deals in a year to replace my job. And that was an oil sands job, but those were also like, it's relative to everyone's market, but most people could replace their income with like 3 or 4 rent-own deals in a year, which is like doing a deal every 3 months, which I know that you can do. Yeah, it was a very achievable goal. And so I made it my goal. And then I started setting up 7 deals in a year. And I set up 12 deals in a year. And then after that, I set up 24 deals in a year. And I went, wow, I'm starting to really set a lot of these up. And then the next year I did 93 deals. And it just, which when people hear that, there were some systems that I used to make life a little easier. But to tell you the truth, I've broken down doing these rent to own deals into about 5 to 8 hours worth of work per deal. Now, it's not like you can just sit down and work for 8 hours straight and you have a rent to own deal. It's a little bit here and a little bit there. And it's basically 5 steps that usually take about an hour each. And then there's a little overtime if you need to put into. So that's really like doing a deal every 3 or 4 days to even achieve that goal of doing about 100 in a year. That's only working every 4 days basically on your real estate business. If you really, really break it down, when you get comfortable with something and then you learn it more, and the more times you do it, you realize there are certain shortcuts you can take, and you realize just how comfortable you are doing something. I know when people ask me, how does that work? I can explain it the same way over and over and over. But if that's what I have to do to get my deal, I'll spend the time. It's about educating the people who you're going to do your deal with, whether it's a property seller, they need to know like how it works for them. Whether it's a property buyer, how does it work for them to be able to buy through the lease to own program? And then of course there's the company, which is me. How do we all make money? And so what I'd like to do is go out and sandwich myself in between those buyers and sellers. And I will set up these rent to own transactions so that sellers can actually get a little more money than they probably would have otherwise. The buyer gets a house that they can live in for a couple of years while they get prepared to be able to get an actual mortgage and buy the house out completely. And my company gets to make some money for being in the middle of that. And that's really is my main focus. I also believe that any type of property, whether you're trying to exit a rental property, like I own some rental properties that I purchased using other people's money and other strategies. And so I have some other properties that are just normal buy and holds. And guess what? When the time comes for me to sell them, I'm going to sell them as a rent to own, as well as anyone else who's had a property for a long period of time and you're already renting it out. It's already your investment property. You might as well maximize the sales side of things.
Outcome, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's the perfect way to sell an existing rental property. I also know some friends of mine that are in the Edmonton and Red Deer market and even the Calgary markets. And they were doing some flip deals, and they haven't all sold. It's just the reality. Not everyone's property sells when they put it up for sale. And so now these people are all considering selling them as rent to owns because they don't live in the house. It's sitting there empty anyways. It might as well generate some revenue. And it might as well have a predictable sale in a couple of years' time. And so a lot of people are starting to turn to this rent to own because there's a really, really good base of buyers out there right now.
Oh, definitely, John. One of the most important aspects of creative real estate investing is knowing strategies and multiple ways of closing the deal or taking over or controlling the process, and then multiple ways of going out, right? You go out from the window, you go out from the garage, you go out from the door, but you have to know quite a lot of different strategies than buy, hold, and rent, right? So kudos for that. Rent to own is one of the very creative strategies aside of the agreement for sale or many other strategies. We do not know what we don't know, but interacting and knowing gentlemen like John and setting up the strategies with his help will be very, very beneficial for anyone, right? I am amazed, John. 6 hours per deal, give or take.
I've done it in as little as 3 for one, like from finding the property, getting it under contract. I would benchmark myself with a 1 hour, and I would the year I did those 93 deals, because I'm sure people that was the year of the Fort McMurray fire. My goal was 100. So I always say if the fire didn't come through, I would have hit my 100 that year. And I still did deals while the fire was on the go. But my main, what I was mainly doing, and those I did a few deals in some other markets when the fire went on, because you have to keep busy, and it's what I love doing. But what I was up to at the time is I would go to a house, and I would go see the house. I would do something I learned. I sold used cars for a year because I wanted to learn how to sell, and it was a 30-hour-a-week job. So I did that for 1 year, and I like cars and stuff, so it was a lot of fun for me, but I had to actually stop myself, and I limited myself to a year, and on the anniversary, I quit selling cars. But we learned this trick when we go to, when the used car manager appraises the trade-in car that the customer brings. So I do this on the houses as well, and you walk through and you don't say too much, and you pause, like if there's a dent in the car, you look at it, you pause a bit. I'd have a clipboard just like they would, and I would write some notes. Maybe the eaves troughs are not draining properly or whatever, right? And we go through and we go, okay, or you put your hand part, you go, what happened here, right? And it's just so that the person realizes, because sometimes in their head, the house they're living in is like this amazing place, and worth a ton. And so you're just pointing out, like, maybe there's some defects here. It's going to come into play later. So what I would do is I'd sit down with them after going through the home. If I'm not interested, I just tell them right there, I'm not going to waste their time. But that turns into a lead that I can sell to a realtor. So it's not a wasted trip. Every trip could, even if there's no deal, there could still be some income generated.
Definitely.
$500 or $600 referral or something. I mean, you work it out. I got a good relationship with my guy that I prefer to use, at least for in Fort McMurray. And so I would go, and so if I'm not going to do the deal, I tell him, well, you should use this particular realtor. He's really good. So you send it to someone else. Reward your realtor for the hard deals that they do when you really need them to, by giving them some leads like that. But if I am interested in the deal, I would propose doing a rent to own. So the owner is I would ask them to get their mortgage statement out. I would look at their situation. Usually I would look in the future and say, look how much gets paid down off your house if you were to actually have the payments covered, if you're just by having the mortgage paid. And so I would set up a lease with an option to purchase. Those are the two legal words. And so I'm going to pay them a rental amount, and I'm going to want to be able to rent this house now. I have the ability to sublet it or to assign the contract if I want to. And then what I do is that gives me the legal rights to actually advertise for this property. I actually have a vested interest in it. We agree to a price on the home. And then what I do is I go and find somebody. So that all takes place in 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I would book myself an hour and a half throughout the day going to see these properties, all for sale by owners. I'd say 95% of my deals are private transactions. And so then I would take the other half hour to drive to the next property, or 10 minutes overtime if you're making a deal. And I would have on my clipboard my contracts with fill in the blanks. What's your name? What's this? You happy with that price? And of course, if someone is unhappy and a couple of days later and says, I don't want to do this, I don't like hold them to it. I'm not a hard guy. I let them out, right? Go ahead. You can have your property back. But if things are going on and I've got someone who's ready to buy it off of me, and what I'll do is I'll rent it to that new buyer, and I will have an option to purchase for them. They'll have the option to purchase it from me for more than I'm getting it from the seller, and their rental price is a little bit more as well. And so that's how, and myself as a company, or anyone could actually do this on any of your own properties or a friend's property. You just got to connect with a private seller, but ultimately it allows you to buy and sell a property without actually having to actually purchase it. And so I consider this like being the Uber of real estate. So we control everything, but we own nothing.
So one of the most important messages here at this aspect is automation and making all the steps defined prior even to reaching out to the homeowners and the sellers, and making sure that you have a system in place, right? Kudos for that, definitely, right? So that's one of the things which I do encourage everybody to consider, setting up those logistics on a regular basis. So tell us more about what you have done today.
So I have now set up over 200 of these sandwich lease option deals, and some of them have been very creative, I think. And so there's one deal, if you don't mind me sharing a little bit of the
Please
story.
do, yeah.
It's one that we just had a buyer move into very recently. So the startup of this deal has happened, and it'll finish in a couple years time. But I went myself, and I actually had a bird dog. This is someone who brings you a deal, or can also be called maybe a wholesaler. But I had this lead come to me from a bird dog. Now and I'll go through the costs of what it costs to actually set this deal up too, so people can see, because there's very little capital required to set these up, and that's what allows you to be able to do like 93 in a year, is because it is not capital intensive. You're not actually marketing. Even though I've raised a lot of money, you're not actually looking for a lot of money to do these deals. But so I call this the pierogi house, and this is
pierogi house.
This is the first time it's being publicly shared, but it's a story that I'm gonna be sharing a little bit more often, and so people might hear about it in time. And so the pierogi house was found because there was some frustrated older people, and they'd been renting out this house for the last 10 years. They experienced what it was like to be a landlord for these are the people who I made the deal with. So it's important to talk and listen to them. And so this person brought them to me because they were complaining about having to find a new renter. Their rental property was empty. The last renter took good care of it, but the previous renter trashed the place.
I see.
The home's in nice condition now. The last renter was not hard on it, but these people, throughout their 10 years of experiencing what it's like to be a landlord, they've kind of felt the upside, but they've also felt the pain of the downside as well. So they did not really want this house anymore, and they wanted to be able to sell it, and getting money right away was not important for them. So that was a component. This is why it's called the pierogi house, is because we did up our contracts right there. Like, I have them with me. I have the fill in the blanks, and we did our contracts, and I had a bag of pierogies. So we gave them a bag of pierogies for the deposit and $100. It's called the Pierogi House. So this is what it costs to get into this deal. Now, there were some other expenses as well, but I mean, this just proves that you don't need a lot of money to get into the game. So we got the bag of pierogies as our deposit. And in our agreement, now I don't always do it this way. Usually I like a couple months of lead time. But they just didn't want to make mortgage payments. So I had agreed with 6 days to the end of the month, 7 days to the end of the month, that I would make their next month mortgage payment. So that was $2,250 a month was enough for them to take. Now, the Pierogi House, we also agreed that now it had a tax assessed value of $510,000. This property is in Kelowna, BC, and on the west side of Kelowna. It's a nice single family home, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2-car garage, and it's got a decent view. And you can see I think it's the Mission Hill Winery from kind of the porch area in the back. So it's nice. It's a good area for families, and it's still somewhat affordable to local people there, which it's important. It's about an average home is about what this is, but it's also a very nice place in good shape. It's something that I can sell. I don't have to come in and do a bunch of fix-ups to it, because that takes time and be managing a lot of people. So the tax assessed value was $510,000. The sellers agreed to a price of $480,000 on this deal. Now they allowed me to have this deal going on for as long as 4 years. And I think I have a pretty good relationship with them, because we've met several times throughout getting all this done. So I think they would extend it if I ever needed to. They're pretty good team players with this. So I start making their rent payments at $2,250 a month. We have a price of $480,000 on a house that would probably appraise. The appraisal values are a little higher than tax assessed. So it'd probably be about a $550,000 house, just if a realtor were to put a for sale sign. So why those people would deal with me instead of just selling it normally is because I'm there to take over those payments right away. And they like that. As well as that $480,000 price, their mortgage is getting paid down more and more and more over the course of the next 4 years. So they're actually going to receive more than $480,000. They're going to receive the $480,000 plus whatever their mortgage pay down is. So that got them excited. It's like giving more than $480,000. It's like,
that's right.
And I also signed a maintenance agreement. I'm going to take over the maintenance of that property from them. So it's a stress-free process for the seller, and I made it easy for them. So it took 4 months to actually get a buyer in there. So I had to pay that $2,250 for 4 months before my buyer came in. Now my buyer is qualified, and they've been screened, and I do have a course where I teach people how to screen people amongst with other things about rent to own, and we can talk about that in a bit. But it's really important to have the proper screening process for these buyers that are going to buy under the terms of a rent to own. So we looked at the fact that the area's been rising with prices in the last little bit. My buyer agreed. Yeah, they understood that. I said, this is about a $550,000 house. They said, yes, that this is about what it's what other homes, if they look online on the internet, other homes on the same street go for that price. And they're very comparable. So it's a fair price. And they agreed with me that in the future, the home will likely be worth a bit more. So we ended up settling at a price of, we were at $615,000 for the sale price in 4 years.
Okay.
So they agreed that was that was fair. Then they did an inspection, and then they renegotiated, and they wanted $6,000 off, because I guess the roof wasn't I didn't go on the roof when I got this deal. It looked really good to me. I guess it only has about 3 or 4 years left in its shelf life. So the guy said, I want $6,000 off so that I can do the roof. So we end up settling at $609,000. Not now. Remember, my price on this home is $480,000, and I actually can receive the difference, and the lawyers can handle that when you exit these deals. You can receive that spread in between. Not only that, I rented the place out for $2,750. So I'm generating $500 a month of passive income on a property that my new buyer has now agreed to take on all the maintenance for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get a phone call saying the toilet's plugged in the middle of the night. And so I'm making $500 a month off this property. And the buyer had $20,000 as a deposit to get started. So I was able to recoup all the months that I paid for the place to be empty.
Easily.
I easily recouped that. I recouped the cost of the pierogies. And then the other thing too is I did pay, and I only pay when I get results. So for doing a deal, if I don't do a deal, I don't pay, but I like to pay generously. And the person who brought me the deal, she hunts for deals full time, and she did everything proper to get the people who are selling the home ready for me when I made the introduction to them. And so I paid her $3,000 for that introduction. So it did cost. So all in all, we got all the money back, about $5,000 extra dollars. Some money was spent doing some marketing, and there were some trips out to the property to do some showings. And the first couple buyers didn't come through. I'm sure we would have had that thing sold in 2 months. It usually takes 1 to 3 months to do these deals, like from start to when someone moves in. So I would consider that a very successful deal, that even though there were some costs like that, they could all be paid when my buyer's deposit came in, if need be. So it didn't cost a whole lot to set that deal up. And there's another 100, and so there's a little over $100,000 at the end of this deal to be able to profit from.
And you have a proven track that, right?
Yeah, I have a process that my buyers go through, whether they need the help or not. We monitor their credit. I encourage checking in with whoever is buying these properties that you're selling like this, if that's something you want to get into. For anyone who's listening or watching, if you want to get into this, you need to have a solid plan. Most of these rent-owns, and if you Google it, you'll see all kinds of bad publicity out there, but you'll also see a lot of people like us who are real estate investors who are getting a little more sophisticated. And everyone who's doing rent-owns that I know really likes doing it. And I know one of the guys who's in your network a lot is Joe Migadel. I've done some deals with him. I've known him for 10 years. Well, we've all been doing rent to owns, and we just love it because we do sell these properties for more money, and we don't have to pay the maintenance on them. And so I think that it's important when these people go to buy them, because it's such a critical part of these deals is actually completing them. If the buyer doesn't buy it, we get to keep their deposit, but it's not about that. I stress that it's never about that. That's a fallback plan. That's a plan B. If things don't work out, we keep the deposit. But the main idea is to actually be in the business of providing homes to these people, not taking their money. So I check in every 90 days with these people just to see how things are going.
So let's talk about bad karma about rent-to-own programs, right? Okay, because that's one of the most easiest ways to start real estate investing at the beginning, because you have an option to purchase and you can have a deposit upfront, and many people, they see in that easy money, right? So can you elaborate more about the organization in which you are involved and how that can benefit anyone who is seriously considering to be a part of rent-to-own family?
Absolutely. There's now, I used to be the president of this association. It's called the Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals. and I've been a director for 6 years. I'm now a minor director. I let another guy run for president. But the whole purpose of the association, it's a nonprofit, so all the directors volunteer their time, is to screen and look at different rent-own companies. If you're doing rent-own already, you should come join the association. The annual fees, I think they're $250. They're very cheap. But what it does is it's a group of rent-own operators, and all they do is talk about how to get these properties into the customer's hands at the end of the day, the person who's doing rent-own and buying from you, and that's the type of place where discussions like how do the changing mortgage rules affect these rent-owns that are going on, how did the changing of the deposit rules affect that, how did the stress tests affect these rent-owns, because it's all affects our exit strategy for our real estate deals. And so the Canadian Association of Rent-Own Professionals makes sure that there's ethical rent-owns being done. And what that means is that operators that are doing rent-own must have proper exit strategies. They must provide their clients with the type of assistance needed. For me, it's a credit check every 90 days. If it's the start of a deal, I might have to check in a little bit more often with them. But it's basically helping guide these people to become homeowners, to be able to buy these properties off us. And so we're not in the business of keeping these deposits. And so that means that whoever's buying them needs to have a fair chance. There has to be a good chance that they can buy the home. And if they don't, it's for some kind of reason that wasn't really able to be seen from the start. So I want to make sure that if they don't make enough income to be able to buy the home, don't put them in the home. If they need 2 years of credit coaching, don't set up a 1-year rent-own. It's not going to work out. And it also means like I will grant extensions if people are doing everything they need to, making their payments on time, attending the credit coaching meetings. Not everyone needs credit coaching, but they have to be monitored. And basically, if they've done everything right, I'll extend the deal longer so that they can have more time to be able to buy it. And it's doing everything possible to make sure that the people who are buying these homes this way can have a good, fair chance at getting them.
So definitely there is a message. If you are seriously considering to operate and run rent-to-own, close to rent-to-own strategies business, CAROP is one of the organizations which everybody should join, right? So thank you very much for sharing that information, and very valuable for building the recognition and definitely following the guidance and making sure that you're up to the date with whatever is happening in rent-to-own program and structuring properly the deals. So, John, I know that you are very, very successful in that what you have been doing, but let's talk about challenges. What kind of challenges you are facing as a business person, as a rent-to-own provider, as a business person?
So some of the challenges is there's always growing pains all the time. I think I did a pretty good job of taking over a lot of the Fort McMurray market and there was a lot of motivated sellers that some people say it made it easier for me, although I know this works in other markets. I get a lot of leads in other cities because I do go around and I do make presentations to different real estate investing groups, and I go to different clubs and I like to watch other speakers and I go to seminars, and so I get all these leads that come to me from cities that I don't really have a team in place. People say, "Oh, this place is about to boom. Why don't you go do some deals there? It's about to boom." Well, I'll only do deals where I have a good team, and it's an experienced team. It's more like a lot of people will think that if they come to learn from me, that I'll find them people with money so that they can do their deals. They need to actually prove themselves on the first one, and so we need to have a few members of these teams to do deals in other cities. And there are some other cities that I do some deals in, because I do have some of my students that have graduated to deal makers. None of these students most of them are not quite full-time real estate investors. They're still juggling a job, and that creates some challenges when you're trying to run your rent-own business. It helps to have some full-time effort at it. So I do some deals with people in other cities, but I would like to be able to do more of that. I would really like to be the company that does lots of rent-owns all across Canada. And so I need people who are going to go become rent-own black belts, just like I had it in my Taekwondo club. And then ultimately they became employees of mine. Well, I'm not looking to make anyone my employee, but I am looking to joint venture with them if they're qualified and if they know what's going on. So it's I don't think it's terribly hard work. I'm still going to be there producing leads, doing marketing, screening buyers, but I need people who can show these properties in each city. I can't be everywhere at once. So that my biggest challenge is going through those growing pains, because I actually need people to come join the team and learn how to do rent own the right way, and ultimately joint venture with, because I get tons of leads all the time, and there's not always anything that comes from them. And I know we can do more deals out there and help more.
The biggest challenge is saying, no, sorry, I have no possibility to close or to be involved.
Exactly. I expect some of the opportunities that come that tell me about the property, it might be already at an incredibly attractive price, and I can't do it. I don't have a team in place. I won't get involved because I'm not going to be driving out to that property all the time. I can't go to the mall all the time.
Okay, so there was a follow-up question. How do you see yourself in the near future? What kind of business? How are you going to predict the future, please?
Well, what I'm hoping to do in the future is I'm hoping to do about 200 of these rent-own deals in the next 2 years myself. I know it's a totally achievable goal, but I also think that when some people come join the team, that even doing like 1,000 of them across Canada is achievable. We might be able to do as much as that many in a year. When I look at the number of sales, I look at what's realistic, and there's a lot of this, and there's a growing demand and need for rent to own. Buyers are having a harder time being able to buy, and the banks are saying no to them. And we're dealing with the people who could get a mortgage a year ago can't at this time. We're not working with bottom bucket buyers. There are incredibly well qualified buyers who have deposits, who just need a little bit of time to be able to buy. And so there's tons of people like that, and the demand is growing, and the quality of these buyers is improving. In the 10 years I've been doing this, we've never had better people who need to buy this way than right now. It's a growing demand, and it's popping up everywhere, and it's starting to become a little bit more common. Even the more regular person actually says, I'm looking for a rent to own, or I would like a rent to own,
Perfect. Some kind of challenges which are very unusual, that means that you have been doing something right, John. Because those challenges are, most of the people which I got involved and interviewed or had pleasure to talk, they having challenges with marketing to generate enough leads. Your opposite side, you cannot help as many people because you are only small, business structured company, right? So definitely there is something to consider. And whoever is listening this presentation, this conversation, reach out to Mr. John, right? There is a johnsimcoe.com. Reach out, ask the questions, take the courses. How expensive your courses are? How cheap they are? How cheap
they are? Well, it's one of those you have to look at what you're getting out of it.
Exactly.
And I want to make it perfectly clear that at least 95%, if not more, of my income comes from doing deals. And I do spend the majority of my time out in the field actually doing real estate deals. But I do get asked a lot about how this works. And so what I did is I recorded some videos, and I created a rent-own course, and I also created an RSP mortgages course as well. Those are the two strategies I've done so many times that I feel very well qualified to answer any question from anyone that comes in. And I have a good network that I can ask as well if I didn't know the answer. But I put these together. They cost $1,000. The rent-own course is $1,000. People get everything they need from marketing materials, contracts, to make it legal, to make it work. They learn how to screen. And not only that, but I want all my students to be successful. So even if you don't want to do a bunch of joint ventures with me, if you just want to do it yourself or sell one of your own properties, you can buy the course for $1,000. And I also offer to every one of the students that I will help them with the screening process of those buyers. It's one of the most critical parts in any of these deals, is having the right buyer who's going to pay the rent on time and who's going to buy the place at the end of the day. And so I offer to help. So there's still a little bit of hand selection there. And of course, any student can ask me questions too, and I'll respond to them. So it's $1,000. It's at johnsimcoe.com. And so you can go pick it up. There's a rent-own course there. I don't think it's terribly expensive, but it has to cost a bit. You have to be willing to invest a little bit in yourself in order to get something out of it. And there are plenty of people who have been successful who have taken the course. And so I'm looking to be able to have some people who go through that course, who go out and do a deal. They take a little bit of initiative on their own. You have to take some of your own action. If you're just going to take the course and sit at home, my help's not going to help you. But if you're going to take the course, do what the course says. I am going to come there. I will help you. I will see what you're doing. And I ultimately want to have some rent-own black belts out there that I can partner with to do my deals with. And so I'd like to get some people from different cities all going through this so that we can basically be the Uber of real estate for Canada.
Uber for real estate.
We'll own no property. We'll own no properties, but we'll sell a lot of properties.
I like the concept of being an Uber style kind of businesses, right? Amazon is selling Uber. Wow. Yep. Definitely something to consider, right? So what I believe that we will wrap it up. John, we can talk for hours, right? We can discuss and make sure that everybody got the proper message, and education is primary key. But as long as you're not going to take an action, nothing will happen. As long as you will not ask the questions, nothing will happen, right? So definitely looking forward to develop some strategies and to spread the word about successful businesses which you are running and helping you in that field. So there is a chance that we will be having a lot of workshops together, and looking forward to help you in your venture. And I can second that I've been knowing quite a lot of business people which they do run rent-to-own, and they take in your courses, John. So you must be doing something very, very right. Thank you very much, John.
Oh, you're welcome.